In this video, I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Dr. Aureliano Stingi, who obtained a PhD in cancer biology at the University of Geneva and is a Master of Business Administration. Dr. Stingi is currently working as a scientific director at Medendi, who give patients a deep understanding of their specific tumour profile and identify and advise the most effective targeted treatment options available. In this video with Dr. Stingi, we cover the new wave of treating cancer and how our health and lifespan can be affected by oxygen levels, afternoon naps, and inflammation, and the steps we can take as individuals to extend our own health and lifespans. As always, please leave any questions you have or points you'd like to raise below in the comments section, and please like and subscribe for more of this content. So, Dr. Stingi, how are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm very happy and excited to be here today.
Fantastic. And thank you very much for coming on my channel. And, I'm really excited to learn more about you, about your career, and the research that you do. So, I guess the best place to start is your background. So, where are you now in terms of your career, and how did you get to here, essentially? So, your educational background, and maybe starting from your degree in molecular biotechnology.
Yeah, so I got my degree in molecular biotechnology at the University of Turin, in Italy, in the north of Italy, where I'm from, basically. But during my, let's say, academic career, I loved to travel as well, and so I got the chance to to go around a little bit in Europe. So during my bachelor, I had an internship at the University of Oxford, that it's not so far from you, I guess,
Yeah, exactly.
where was my first experience abroad. And like all the good Italians, I went there and I was basically not able to, to speak a single word of English. Not that my level now it's really improved, but at least now I can have a conversation. But when I arrived in Oxford, it was really like zero level.
Mm,
But was one of the best experience of my life in terms of like fun. Of course, was extremely fun, but also I was in a lab in one of the best university of the world, so
mm,
I was super excited. And I was working on DNA damage. We were working around those mechanisms that would initiate cancer. Then during the master, I moved to Spain in
mm,
Madrid. And also there was a fantastic experience,
mm.
different atmosphere, because I was in Spain, so more similar to Italy,
Yeah,
different atmosphere compared to UK.
yeah.
Also there, I think uh, my small advice for young student is to try to take as many opportunity as you can, because
Mm,
those type of experiences are the one that really make you grow in
yeah.
any type of context, let's say. Then after that, I came back to Italy. I graduated. My thesis was about immunotherapy.
Mm,
Was 2012, I think.
yeah.
And for immunotherapy in cancer was a bit early days, and
Mm,
also that was super exciting. We were working on melanoma
okay.
on mice model, so it
Mm,
was super exciting. And then I decided to do my PhD in Switzerland, so I moved to Geneva, and I had my PhD at University of Geneva.
wow.
I was working on retinoblastoma,
Mm-hmm,
so it's a type of tumor, pediatric tumor, but also if you guys knows biology and genetics, you
mm-hmm.
probably recognize retinoblastoma protein or retinoblastoma gene RB,
Yeah.
because it's one of the genes that you would normally study when you start to understand how cancer genetics works. So
Yeah.
it's the type of gene that if you lose one copy, you are still fine, but if you lose the both copies, then you will develop different type of cancer. So that was my PhD thesis, was about the, again, some mechanism, carcinogenic mechanism based on RB and cell cycle mitosis. And then I came back to Italy and I changed a little bit my career, I would say. I mean, it
Okay.
was not a real change, because I had an MBA, so a master in business administration, because I wanted to have a different perspective, a different view
Yeah.
of course, my attention, my curiosity was all the time about healthcare, about life science,
Mhm.
about oncology, but I wanted to have it from the other side of the bench, let's say. And I studied a little bit the market, finance, economy, etc.
Mhm.
And then I moved to the place where I am now. It's a startup. It's called Medendi. It's a startup that is dealing with precision oncology. So we basically analyze tumors directly from the patients, and we do that to increase the comprehension of the tumor for the patient, of course, for the oncologist, because we would like to apply this famous
Yeah.
precision medicine approach
Yeah.
that we hear all about this approach, but then uh, I think it's it's also important to try to apply this principle, no? Because it's a fancy word to
Mm.
say precision medicine, but then like we really need to apply this principle to the patients.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm doing now. So basically, we are sequencing or doing proteomic analysis over tumor biopsies, helping cancer patients and oncologists.
That's so fascinating. Just on that point of the precision medicine with regards to cancer treatment. So I'm aware that cancer it's and tumors are quite they evolve. They're not sort of static things essentially. So how often would the tumor be profiled in order to sort of understand how differently the treatment mechanisms might need to be changed if you see what I'm saying there. So would it be like a monthly basis? Would it be every 4 months, every 6 months, or just once?
That's a very good question. As you said, perfectly said, cancer is an evolving machine. So it's basically evolution that is acting, no, inside our body. It's a combination of many different mutations, and it's a continuous selection of this mutation. No, so it's something that is always evolving. And of course, when you are dealing with something that is so fast and accumulates so many mutations, you need to take different pictures, and you need to do it in a how to say longitudinal way. So you
Mm.
really need to follow the cancer, and today, unfortunately, we cannot take so many pictures of the cancer because it's a matter of money. Let's say it's a matter of
Yes.
also logistic, because you, in a perfect world, as I always say, you should take as many pictures as you can. So basically, every month or every time that you do chemo, every time, every 2 months, you should take a picture, at
Mhm.
least with the liquid biopsy. And we will see maybe later what's the difference between solid biopsy, liquid biopsy. But
Mhm.
the point is that you need to take so many pictures of the cancer just to try to understand the way it's evolving. Okay,
Mhm.
you will never know where it's going, but at least you can have a precise picture of what is happening inside the cancer. And the cancer, why is evolving? Mm, Mostly because we are trying to fight it. So we are
Yeah.
giving chemo to the patient or any type of drug, and like a bug, like a bacteria, the cancer is evolving to escape these drugs, right? So basically, it's us with the chemo that we are forcing the tumor to evolve. And of course, this is not bad. That's the only way that we have to deal
Mhm.
with cancer. But that's the basically the reaction of the tumor is to accumulate even more mutations.
Wow. Yeah, so fascinating. And okay, I can see that from your researchers and sort of the research that I did on you there that you're also into sort of longevity and looking at the research surrounding aging and longevity. So, in basic terms, for my audience, this is sort of research that is conducted on humans, animals, as well as within non-living organisms, and this is essentially this essentially ultimately provides us with insights on how to live a longer and healthier life. Right. So recently, I read an article you had written which asked, data from it essentially stated that data from a recent experiment performed on mice seemed to indicate that reduced oxygen concentrations can lengthen the life expectancy of rodents. So that's really, really fascinating. Could you explain to my audience, how exactly did the researchers get these results, if you could? And maybe a follow up question from that is: are these results valid for humans? And if so, how could we implement this into our lives? Because obviously, oxygen, it's a fundamental gas for life, right? So reducing it might be quite difficult.
Exactly, exactly. Very good point. And all the time that I'm writing this type of articles, I have to make a big disclaimer, writing like, "Don't try this at home," because
Yeah.
despite is working on mice, you shouldn't try at home to reduce your oxygen concentration. Let me just make a small comment before to answer to those two questions that are actually very a smart question. Why am I talking about longevity despite my background is in cancer? Actually, the answer is really maybe not obvious, but I hope it will make sense. Basically, even if it's not so obvious, but cancer and longevity are really connected. What
Hmm.
does it mean? It means that the first major risk factor for cancer development is aging. If I put this in an extreme way, so some scientists, they said in the past that if a human being could live long enough, he would at some point develop cancer.
Hmm.
So it's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if. Okay. So just to make it clear.
Hmm.
So my point is that those two mechanisms, aging and cancer, are really connected. The majority of the cancer hallmarks, and the hallmarks are like those features that would characterize cancer, are shared, are in common with aging. So it's very simple then to talk about cancer and aging because those two, let's say, fields, they overlap a lot. So this just as a small disclaimer why I also talk about longevity.
Yeah. Okay.
Coming back to your question, the experiment on mice, I think, was really elegant because I find an experiment elegant when it's very simple to explain.
Hmm.
Because if you can understand it the way it's done, then I think you as a scientist also you achieve a good goal, no? Because
Yeah.
instead, sometimes you would see those experiments that are so complicated that it would take you like 3 pages, just to understand the setup. Here was very simple. They took a group of mice, and those mice are genetically engineered to die young. What does it mean? It means that you can do genetic editing over mice, and you can create a mice that instead of living 2 years, they would live 6 months. Okay, so they're genetically, let's say, predisposed to die young.
Hmm.
Okay, that's the model that they used. They took this big group of mice and they divided in two groups, 100 and 100, let's say, just to keep it simple.
Yep.
To the first group, group A, they put them in a cage, normal oxygen, normal food, normal water, everything was normal. And they left the mice inside the cage. After 6 months, they died. No surprise, okay? Those mice, they were like programmed to die young.
Yeah.
The other group of mice, same conditions, same water, same food, same cage, but the amount of oxygen was reduced.
Wow.
So they, instead of having 20% of oxygen, that is the percentage that we have in the air, they had 11%. 11% of oxygen, so it's 50% less, let's say,
Hmm.
is the amount of oxygen that you would have on the base camp of Everest Mount. So on the Everest, okay?
Okay.
And you know, guys, that when you go on the Everest, you go with the oxygen
Yeah.
tank because otherwise you would experience bad consequences.
Yeah.
And the group of mice, the group B, let's say, exposed to half concentration of oxygen, they would live 50% more.
Wow.
So very simple, straightforward.
Mhm.
You may ask to yourself how it's possible, and it's a very legit and smart question. But then, if you study the biochemistry, it would make sense because basically, oxygen, yes, on one hand, is the element, is the gas that uh, allowed the life on the earth, and without oxygen, we cannot live.
Mhm.
Us, at least, the
Yep.
majority of the living creatures. But at the same time, oxygen is able to oxidate, like the name would suggest. And the oxidation here is a bit complicated, but let's put it in that way. basically oxygen does the to our body what the water does to the iron, for example. No, so
Mm.
you can put water on the iron, there's no problem, but at some point it would start forming the rust. It's
Hmm.
called rust,
Right.
right?
Yep. Correct.
Yeah, so it's the water that is deteriorating the iron, and after, I don't know, years, you would destroy completely the iron. Similar process is happening with the oxygen inside our body. So here the problem is not the oxygen as a gas, but as a molecule.
Mm.
Again, on one end is really crucial for any type of respiration, any type of biochemical reaction in our body, but at the same time it causes oxidation. Oxidation, it would cause stress, and the stress finally would cause aging, so it would damage many different structures inside our body. So if we come back, basically, if you reduce the amount of oxygen, you would reduce the oxidation, and therefore you would
So,
reduce the aging.
wow.
So that's the minimal explanation for this experiment.
Okay.
Just to conclude, I would not
Yeah.
recommend or advise to reduce your oxygen
Y-
concentration, because you would experience other type of consequence before the longevity benefit.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm having a bit of a thought about how that can be applied to humans. One way in which I'm thinking, you mentioned Everest. If humans were to, you know, sort of apply sort of altitude training into their lifestyles, would that benefit them in that way? And is there maybe some sort of foods or certain exercises or anything like that that can reduce the effect of this oxidative stress on longevity? So my essential question is, how can we apply this to humans without obviously starving ourselves of oxygen?
Very good point. That's exactly the point of all my communication around longevity research, because longevity research is very cool for scientists. When we see results on mice, we are super excited. But lay people would ask me, okay, very cool, very interesting, but how can I apply that to my life, to my everyday life? And that's exactly what I would like to try to answer, no? Because we need to translate this very cool science into tips, or like recommendation for everyday life. And regarding that, since we cannot reduce the concentration of oxygen, also we need to mention that these observations were also made in a population that would live to very high altitude.
Yeah.
For example, people in Nepal or
Yeah, I was
even in
about to
South
ask that
America.
actually. Yeah, yeah.
They observed at epidemiological level. So again, it's not so strong, let's say, this finding, but at least is a correlation
Mhm.
that those population, they have a longer lifespan.
Wow.
Again, we don't know if there's another element. Maybe it's the
Mm, of
food,
course.
maybe is the, I don't know, the pollution. We don't know, but at least there's a correlation. But coming back to your question, how can I apply that? The take home message, I would say that we need to reduce oxidation and oxidative stress in our body, because oxygen is good, but at the same time it would damage our body. How can I reduce oxidative stress? With mostly with the nutrition, so with
Yes.
a type of diet that is rich in fruits and vegetables, because fruits and vegetables, they would contain uh, molecules that are the ability to reduce the inflammation. And also we need to avoid any type of behavior that would increase this oxidative stress. The oxidative stress, as you can
Mhm.
imagine, is also caused by alcohol consumption,
Yeah, exactly.
smoking,
Yeah.
all the classical stuff. But the classical stuff makes sense when you apply them to this type of scientific research, because we all know the recommendation. We all know
Of
that we
course.
should eat a lot of vegetables and
Mm.
fruits. We all know that we should be active, etc. But to me, in order to really take those recommendations, I need to understand why, right?
Of
Because
course.
for me, it's not enough, eat vegetables. Why? Because,
Yeah.
and here is the explanation. So to me, I think it really makes sense to put all the pieces together.
Yeah, and actually, just on that point, the advice that I follow, and just I like to keep things simple in my life sometimes, is count the colors that you eat, not the calories. I know, obviously, counting the number of calories is important, but having these different colored vegetables, having cabbage, but purple cabbage or white cabbage and stuff like that. All these different the colors that the compounds that provide these colors to the vegetables have these benefits. Is my understanding there. Um, but yeah, like for example, sulforaphane has a lot of anti-cancer properties, in one sort of paper that I read. But yeah, that's really really fascinating. So the bottom line is sort of nutrition and avoiding things like smoking and alcohol consumption that can increase this oxidative stress on our bodies. Really. Okay.
Correct, correct.
All right. Brilliant. Okay. So the staying on the theme of longevity, this particular article you've written had a rather engaging title. Afternoon naps and longevity, are they connected? So, could you explain to us, what is the answer to this question? Because it's a very interesting question. I guess we all love to have an afternoon nap from time to time. So, yeah. So, what's the answer to this question and the scientific evidence that supports this answer, essentially?
Yes, also this was also a surprise for me because, to be honest, sometimes I'm writing down pieces that are obvious. No, for example, eat fruit and vegetables, be active. We know that is correct. But for example, napping in the afternoon, I had no idea that was so beneficial for
Mm,
the brain. In this particular paper, they were taking consideration the brain size, and we know that brain size is how we could call it, like a proxy for mental health sometimes. Because, for example, in many neurodegenerative diseases, the dimension of the brain would reduce. There's a shrinkage of the brain,
mm,
or some specific area of the brain. Let's put it that way; it's more correct. And they would observe, those scientists, that people that would take those small, because they need to be small, less than 30 minutes,
mm,
small naps in the afternoon, they would have bigger brain. And for the moment, it's a correlation. Again, as we said before, correlation are cool because I think they point where to look at rather than they tell me what's going on, right?
of
So
course.
correlation is just a cool place to start,
Mhm,
because we never know. In fact, I put it in the article, like I wrote it. We don't know if the people with the bigger brain, they would nap in the afternoon or the other way around. So people that nap in the afternoon, they would develop like a bigger brain. We don't know. At the moment, we don't know. We only know that people that nap in the afternoon, they have a bigger brain. And I think this is really a good starting point to do research to understand, first, bigger brain corresponds to like increased cognitive ability, for example. So I don't know, I have more memory, I can do more stuff, more, I don't know, cognitive task, etc.
mm,
And then what I think it's important to understand, but I think also they kind of address it. I would like to understand what is the cause and what is the consequence.
yeah.
If I remember correctly, in this paper, they would use this Mendelian randomization.
Okay.
So basically, it's a new, let's call it new, because recently it's becoming more uh, famous
Mhm,
way of dividing the groups inside the experiments. So in the past, you would simply take a population and divide it into groups, like randomly.
yeah.
Now, what I think people are tending to do more is to use Mendel. So Mendel was a scientist of the past
Yeah.
that would study genetics. I think was one of the first geneticists.
Mhm.
So was studying um, how genetics works, and he was doing that with the, I don't know how to call it in English, those small plants.
Is it? I think it was
The
peas he was using. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
exactly, bro.
Yeah,
Exactly, exactly.
we did it 6 7 years ago now. Back in the
Exactly. And also for that, I
day.
forgot. But basically, Mendel understood how genetic works. And so, if I have blue eyes and my wife has blue eyes,
Mm.
probably our kids will be blue eyes. Those
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mendelian
Linkage,
stuff.
yeah.
But Mendelian randomization means that instead of dividing the population into groups randomly, I would check at their genes and divide them according to them. So it's unbiased because it's really like I put together people only according to their genetics. So I have no idea what they do in their life, habits, whatever. I only divide them according to the genetics. And so I don't have bias. I give you an example of a bias. For example, I want to know. Also, I give you a real example. In the past, in the last, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
people realized that the cheese or like fats were bad for the organism, right? There was a moment in which everything was like fat free, the fat were like evil. And people were doing these studies in which they were associating the amount of fat that you would eat during the day and the mortality, no? And for example, in US, there was a clear correlation between the amount of fat that you would eat and the mortality. More fat you eat and more you die.
Yeah.
This makes sense.
Mm.
In France, they were doing the same studies, but they found that was not true. So indeed, it was called the French paradox, because in France, guys, they eat a lot of cheese
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they are famous for the cheese. But there was not a correlation between the amount of cheese and the mortality.
Mm.
No, and the people, they were wondering, what's going on in France. And at some point, some epidemiologists said, no, we understood why, because in France they also drink red wine. And in the past, they thought that the red wine was protective
Oh.
for cardiovascular disease. And they said, okay, they eat a lot of cheese, but they also drink wine, so they don't die. No, but then later, they realized that this was a bias. Why was a bias? Because basically, the people that they were eating a lot of cheese, they were also drinking wine.
Mm.
They were also the people, the richest of the population.
Okay.
And so, if you select rich people, the mortality is lower compared to the
Of course.
poor people, right? And so this type of a bias, because basically you are simply taking into consideration maybe two parameters, but then you are not taking into consideration the other parameters,
Mm.
and you may do a mistake because you think, okay, the wine is protective and the cheese, for example, is a risk factor. Was totally wrong.
Mm.
Today we know that, for example, red wine has basically zero protection toward any type of disease. It's also increased the mortality. Cheese, it depends. But we know, for example, that if you are rich, your mortality is lower compared if you're poor.
Mm.
So that was a very long example to explain what is a bias. Just to, at the end of the story,
Mm.
Mendelian randomization, in theory, reduce this type of bias.
Yeah.
And nowadays, a lot of these studies are done with the Mendelian randomization.
Okay.
And just to conclude, in the napping experiment, they were doing Mendelian randomization, and in theory, with Mendelian randomization, you are excluding this type of people that would sleep more because they have bigger brain,
Mm.
because you are dividing the population in a way that you cannot observe that. So, in theory, if you do a small nap in the afternoon, you would increase the size of your brain and potentially also your cognitive ability, let's say.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, and just staying on the point of like sleep and its importance, really. Um, I'm pretty sure this was the book of Why We Sleep by Professor Walker that I read, and there was a study done on. I'm not sure of the details of the study, but it was done on people that had slept 4 hours as opposed to those who slept 8, and both those sort of groups of people were compared, and the people that slept 4 hours, they had 70% less natural killer cells circulating their system. And obviously, just for my audience, natural killer cells being sort of cells that they're part of the immune system and they fight off things like cancers before they sort of start developing. So that's just astonishing, really. How much the 4 hours of sleep can have such a big impact on your ability to fight off cancers and other infections and things like that, which is it's really fascinating. Okay, yeah. So I was just going to touch on another longevity uh, article, because obviously it's undeniably it's a hot topic nowadays. So I'd like to mention the silent medical condition that affects our longevity negatively, much more than our genetic makeup might, and that was low grade inflammation. So please could you outline what exactly is low grade inflammation? And so like, can it decrease our longevity? Oh, sorry. Why can it decrease our longevity? And what can we do to turn off this low grade inflammation?
Yes, a very good point, and also it's clearly connected with the type of inflammation that we mentioned at the beginning, the one that is connected to oxygen
Mm,
um, stress. This kind of low grade inflammation, as the name would suggest, is a type of inflammation that it would occur inside our body, and it's completely silent. It's not something that we are not aware of, because, for example, when we experience acute inflammation, we realize it, because sometimes we would have, for example, fever, or we would have in a specific part of the body. Uh, for example, if we get injured, we then experience the swallowing part, and we feel that is hotter. We
mm,
recognize acute inflammation. What we don't recognize is this low grade chronic inflammation. And um, on one end, we have the acute inflammation that is crucial for our body to fight, for example, infection.
yeah,
And it's a mechanism that is extremely powerful, but also needs to be regulated in a precise way.
of course.
So, meaning when we activate it, then we need to deactivate it quickly.
Hmm.
But in some case, we may remain in this state of low inflammation.
Hmm.
Um, and this chronic low grade inflammation is triggered by different things. Of course, we may have a specific disease or condition that would trigger it, and
Hmm.
those are the most dangerous and hard to control. Because, for example, there are some uh, autoimmune disease that would trigger this type of inflammation
Yeah.
that is not something that we can control,
Hmm.
unfortunately. But also some other, let's say, behavior would trigger this type of inflammation. For example, there are some type of diets that are very rich in ultra processed food,
Mm, mm,
food that are very high in calories, salt, sugar, uh, all these type of nutrients that are uh, responsible also for this type of inflammation. Again, alcohol consumption, smoking, also the stress that we can experience. If you have a high level of cortisol,
yeah. And
then
sorry,
please.
just before you move on there, just the point on the ultra processed foods, and I want to mention even sort of simple foods like a lot of bread in superstores, they may contain like texturizing agents, mono and diglyceride of fatty acids and things like that, which these emulsifiers, they actually to me, I feel they can cause this inflammation from the research that I've done, and this prolonged inflammation, because if you eat this every day, have a toast for breakfast every day, and this prolonged inflammation can actually promote things like colon cancer, because obviously these foods and these agents pass through your bodies, right? um so I guess, yeah, would that be like something to look out for, maybe opting for breads that are organic and have none of these additives in them might be a better route to take to avoid this inflammation.
Absolutely, very good point. As a rule of thumb, uh, they say that you shouldn't eat anything that your grandmother or grandfather wouldn't recognize.
Mm,
That
mm,
meaning our grandfather or mother, they probably lived between the last 2 centuries,
mhm,
and the type of food that they would eat was very simple, vegetables and fruits, some meats, for example, like beef or chicken, some fish, of course, but they had no access to any type of ultra processed food or processed food, of course. And that's the rule of thumb. Of course, it's not a guideline, but it's just to make you understand that it's something that you cannot find like the way it is in nature. You
Yeah.
should probably avoid it, or at least eat it very like not so often,
So
because of course as you just said, the industry was very good in making this food super cheap
mm,
and super rich in nutrients, and that was very good because it allowed us to grow as a population, etc. But at the same time, since our diet really changed, and also our the level of activity that we can perform every day changed compared to the past. Now we are really always in a surplus of calories, and this type of food is full of calories, and this is something that we should pay attention. And again, as we said, this type of food, lifestyle, a series of things that we all know, they may contribute to this low grade inflammation. For example, type 2 diabetes, also the metabolic syndrome. All these elements, they are really dangerous because they are silent. You wouldn't recognize them until the symptoms. But when you have the symptoms, it's pretty late.
mm,
So it's something that we should start be aware when we are young, I guess. And because those processes, as you just mentioned, colorectal cancer. So to develop colorectal cancer, it takes on average 10 to 15 years.
yeah.
Meaning, when you have diagnosis at 65, meaning that you probably
Had
start, you did a mistake 10
yeah,
or
yeah.
15
So
years before.
having that chronic inflammation,
Exactly.
yeah, that's my point there. So it's like, so just to sort of just to summarize for the audience, so it would be eating foods that are as close to nature as possible, essentially. Avoid maybe you can have a treat from time to time, but maybe avoiding things like I don't know, so biscuits seem quite processed and things like that.
Yeah,
Just fit,
anything that goes in the oven, those are pre-made meals
yeah,
that are actually, I mean, I'm not blaming people because I'm the first one that sometimes, when you are super in a hurry, you need something to eat very quickly. Those are very handy, that's why they're so sold, because they are very easy to prepare, easy to eat. They're very palatable, so very good. The taste is super strong. So we cannot blame people for that. It's more like blaming industries, maybe, but it's not
mm,
a matter of blaming. It's just a matter of being aware that this type of food, it may contribute to this state of inflammation. This state of inflammation, it would bring you to neurodegenerative diseases, cancer, and also not last but not least, also to aging, because it would increase the rate of stress inside your body, and oxidative stress. And this oxidative stress, as we saw at the beginning, it would contribute also to premature aging.
yeah. And it's interesting because, for example, like it might be these fruit bars. Some of them are actually seem really ultra processed and have a lot of additives in them. So I actually have this app, and I don't have any affiliation to this app, but I find it really, really interesting. It's called Yuka,
I know.
Yuka, and it's such a fascinating app because you literally scan whatever you want in the shop, and it would show you, this has sodium diphosphates in them, and obviously that's excess phosphate consumption can lead to, or phosphorus consumption can lead to cardiovascular diseases, for example, and things like that, essentially. So the way I sort of did this was I'd would be a bit odd, but scanning certain breads in the shop before I bought them, and I would see that this organic no additive bread does indeed have no additives in them. So that's no additives that can cause inflammation and things like that. And that bread might not last as long. It might not be as tasty, but
Hmm.
I'm aware that it's not going to be negatively impacting my health as much as bread that does have these additives in them and things like that. And these things are hidden in a lot of products that I wouldn't have known would have these in them. So that's that's another point there, really. Um, but yeah, okay, interesting. Right. Okay, I'm just looking at the time now. I know it's you're quite busy, so I think we should start wrapping it up now. Um, I'd like to just say, I'd love to continue, talking about these fascinating discussions here. Um, but I think I think it's time I let you go here. You've been fantastic today. It's been a pleasure having you on my channel. And essentially, I wish you all the best. And who knows, maybe in the future we can have another discussion surrounding the research you've been writing about and doing yourself.
Would be amazing. It was very funny for me to participate, and the reason why I write about science is because I love to talk about science. So I'm open to come back and again discuss with you science. Again, apologize for my English.
No, it's been fantastic. I've understood everything that you've mentioned there. I'm sure my
it's
listeners
been
will.
it's been too much time that I'm back in Italy, so I need to go back
Yeah.
abroad to again uh,
Uh,
improve my English. So was a pleasure. Thanks for listening, and see you around.
okay, fantastic.